Imagine holding like a winning lottery ticket in your hand. I mean, we're talking about a cast iron guarantee of a comfortable, highly lucrative, wealthy life.
Right.
Now, imagine just walking over to a trash can, throwing that ticket away, and deciding instead to go pan for gold on some alien planet where the atmosphere might actually be toxic.
Yeah, that sounds completely unhinged.
It does. But that wildly irrational, almost reckless gamble is exactly what Jeff Bezos did in 1994. And today on this deep dive, we are going to completely shatter that polished, sanitized myth of the genius founder sketching a master plan in a garage.
Because that myth is, frankly, it's dangerous. We love this cinematic narrative that monumental success is just the result of uninterrupted, brilliant foresight.
Oh, totally. The lone genius.
Exactly. But when you look at the raw reality of early Amazon, it is anything but a straight line. I mean, it's a gritty, unvarnished survival story that's really defined by massive operational failures, near collapse, and just intense internal chaos.
And to really grasp the sheer scale of the gamble here, we have to ground ourselves in what 1994 actually looked like. Because, I mean, for you listening right now, it's easy to forget that this is an era where the internet is essentially just a novelty for academics.
Yeah, barely anyone was online.
Right. We're talking about dial-up modems that physically shrieked when you connected. Loading a single low-resolution image took minutes. And, the vast majority of people didn't even own a personal computer.
Right, and in that specific environment, you have Bezos working at D.E. Shaw & Co., which is this incredibly elite, highly prestigious quantitative hedge fund.
He was making serious money.
Oh, absolutely. He's not some desperate college dropout with nothing to lose, coding in a dorm room. He is on a phenomenal, extremely stable career trajectory in a financial world that makes perfect, predictable sense.
So walking away from that to go sell paperbacks on an obscure, totally unproven digital network, I mean, that wasn't a visionary move to anyone watching. It looked insane.
Completely irrational. But, understanding that starting point is exactly why this deep dive matters to you, the listener. What we are exploring today is not just a historical biography of a tech company.
No, it's really
That's a blueprint for resilience.
Yeah.
If you have ever felt totally overwhelmed by your own mistakes, or if the project you're building right now feels like it's just drowning in operational chaos, this story proves that expecting failure and engineering a system to actually learn from it is the mechanical secret to scale.
So let's just pull the curtain back on that chaos because it is staggering. That romanticized garage startup story completely glosses over the fact that early Amazon was defined by one glaring, almost fatal flaw.
Yeah.
They completely underestimated the physical reality of logistics.
They absolutely did. I mean, they had a brilliant grasp of the digital interface, the website side of things, but they fundamentally misunderstood the sheer brutal complexity of moving a physical object from point A to point B.
And the visual here from the sources is just incredibly grounding. They have this grand vision of becoming the everything store. But the reality on the ground is early employees, including top executives, literally sitting on their knees on a concrete floor.
Just cutting cardboard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cutting cardboard and packing books by hand.
It's wild. And let's break down the actual mechanics of why that was such a total disaster. There was zero automation, no conveyor belts,
None.
no barcode scanners instantly updating some centralized database.
Okay.
When a customer clicked buy on the website, a physical piece of paper had to be printed out.
Wait, like a literal printout for every order.
A literal piece of paper. And then a human being had to take that paper, walk through a highly disorganized warehouse, find the specific book, bring it back, sit on the floor, and physically tape up a box.
Wow.
So in a startup environment where order volume is suddenly spiking, those human beings are just physically overwhelmed. Systems constantly broke down, inventory was miscounted all the time, and orders were routinely delayed.
Just knees aching, packing tape tangled everywhere, utter inefficiency.
Yeah, exactly.
But getting a paperback into a box was really only the first bottleneck. Because the real chaos hits in the late 90s when they hit hypergrowth.
Right, the expansion.
Suddenly, they aren't just selling books. They're aggressively expanding into music, electronics, toys. And this is where I genuinely struggle to understand the strategy.
How so?
Well, if you can barely ship a standard-sized paperback book without your knees bleeding on a concrete floor, how on earth do you justify suddenly throwing CD players and plush toys into those same boxes? Was that just pure hubris?
I mean, it looks like hubris from the outside, sure, but it is actually a classic mechanical trap of aggressive scaling.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, when a company experiences hypergrowth, the top-line revenue, that thrill of capturing massive market share, it acts as a smokescreen. The logic is that you must capture the territory before a competitor does. But that top-line growth temporarily blinds the leadership to the foundational cracks in the actual business model. Because everyone is just pointing at the sales chart going up and completely ignoring the fire in the warehouse.
Exactly. But think about the physical mechanics of that specific expansion. A book is a uniform rectangular object.
Right,
It is easy to stack, it doesn't break if you drop it, and it fits perfectly into standard packaging.
right.
But an expansion into electronics and toys, suddenly you are dealing with 1,000 different box sizes. You are dealing with fragile items that shatter in transit. You are dealing with complex return policies for like defective boom boxes.
Oh, man.
The internal infrastructure, that whole floor packing model, it fundamentally shattered under the weight of that new complexity.
Which directly triggers massive financial losses and just incredible operational strain. The foundation was actively crumbling. And that directly sets the stage for the year 2000.
The dot-com crash.
Yeah, let's set the scene for you.
Yes.
It's turn of the millennium. The tech bubble has spectacularly burst. Internet companies that had billion-dollar valuations are evaporating literally overnight, totally worthless.
It was a bloodbath. And Amazon is bleeding.
Yeah.
They are losing billions of dollars. Analysts aren't just skeptical, they are openly, loudly predicting the company will go bankrupt.
Yeah, the financial press was literally calling the company Amazon.bomb.
Amazon.bomb. Wow.
Right. And the pressure from Wall Street to immediately show a profit, to slash costs and appease the critics, it was immense.
But Bezos does something that defies all conventional wisdom. Instead of retreating and squeezing out a tiny symbolic quarterly profit just to get the analysts off his back, he doubles down.
He does.
He becomes fanatically obsessed with long-term dominance and one very specific metric, which is cash flow. And I get that cash flow is important, but if I'm an investor in the year 2000 and I see the ship actively sinking, I don't care about long-term strategy. I care about the massive hole in the hull. How did he justify ignoring profit?
To understand that, we really have to separate profit from cash flow mechanically. The traditional market fundamentally rewards short-term quarterly profits because it proves the business model is working right now. Profit is just an accounting metric. It's revenue minus expenses over a period of time.
Right.
But cash flow is oxygen. It is the actual, literal money moving in and out of your bank account on any given day.
Okay, give me a tangible example of how that works in practice. How does cash flow save a bleeding company?
Think about a grocery store. When you walk in and buy a gallon of milk, you hand the cashier $3.
Yeah.
The store gets your cash instantly, but the store doesn't turn around and pay the dairy farmer that exact same afternoon. They have a supplier agreement where they pay the farmer 30, maybe 60 days later.
So for those 30 days, the grocery store just has your $3 sitting in their bank account.
Precisely. That window of time creates what we call the float.
The float.
Yes. It is essentially an interest-free loan from your suppliers. And Bezos realized that if Amazon could maintain incredibly strong cash flow, meaning collecting customer payments instantly, while delaying payments to publishers and manufacturers, they would generate massive amounts of this float.
Wow.
So they could technically operate at a massive loss on paper, but still have billions in actual cash sitting in the bank to survive the nuclear winter of the dot-com crash.
Okay, so while Wall Street is screaming at them to, grow radishes so they can eat tomorrow, Bezos is using this float to quietly buy up all the land to plant an apple orchard that won't bear fruit for a decade.
Exactly. The investors demanded radishes. They wanted proof of immediate viability. But by focusing entirely on cash flow, he bought the company the most valuable asset in business, which is breathing room.
Breathing room.
Right. It wasn't about looking good on a quarterly earnings report. It was about ensuring they had the literal capital to keep the lights on while all their competitors went bankrupt.
Wait. So they have this breathing room. They have this massive pool of cash from the float. But how did that actually solve the internal chaos? Because earlier we were talking about people sitting on the floor surrounded by packing tape.
Well, it's because of what they chose to do with that cash. They took that float and poured every single dime of it directly into the concrete of massive fulfillment centers.
Oh, I see.
They took their biggest, most glaring weakness, their logistics, and they weaponized it.
Right. They completely reinvented how a warehouse even works. They didn't just copy Walmart.
No, they completely inverted the traditional retail model. If you go to a traditional big box warehouse, the inventory is grouped logically.
Like by category.
Yeah, all the toothpaste is in aisle 4.
Uh-huh.
All the t-shirts are in aisle 9. So if an order comes in for a toothbrush and a t-shirt, a human worker has to walk all the way down aisle 4 and then all the way over to aisle 9.
Which takes time, and time is money.
Exactly. So Amazon developed a mechanism called chaotic storage.
Chaotic storage.
Right. When inventory arrives, it isn't grouped by category at all. It is placed randomly wherever there is empty space on a shelf. A book sits next to a blender, which sits next to a plush toy.
That sounds like a nightmare to find anything.
For a human, yes. But everything is meticulously tracked by barcodes and a centralized computer system. So when an order comes in, the computer maps the absolute shortest, mathematically perfect walking path for the worker to grab those items.
Man, they engineered the human inefficiency totally out of the system. They turned the very thing that was killing them into this impenetrable moat.
They did.
Which perfectly tees up the absolute most fascinating pivot in this entire survival story, obviously. Amazon Web Services, or AWS.
AWS is perhaps the most critical lesson in this entire deep dive. Today, we know AWS as the invisible backbone of the modern internet. It powers a massive percentage of the websites, apps, and streaming services you use every single day.
But what blows my mind from looking at the sources is that AWS was never intended to be a product they sold to customers. It wasn't some grand master plan to take over cloud computing.
Not at all. It started purely as a desperate internal solution to their own technological chaos.
Really?
Yeah. As Amazon was growing and building out these massive fulfillment systems, their software engineers were constantly bogged down. The internal architecture was what we call a monolithic code base.
Okay, monolithic code base. That sounds like heavy corporate speak. What does that actually mean for the engineers who are just trying to do their jobs?
Think of a monolithic code base, like a giant tangled ball of yarn, or like a massive Jenga tower. All the different functions of the website, the shopping cart, the product pages, the customer reviews, the checkout system, they were all tangled together in one massive block of code.
Oh, so they're all interconnected.
Exactly. So if an engineer wanted to build a new feature or just fix a tiny bug in the shopping cart, they risked accidentally crashing the entire checkout system.
Jeez.
Every time a team wanted to launch something, they had to spend weeks untangling the code and building the underlying server infrastructure totally from scratch.
So they're just stepping on each other's toes constantly.
Yeah, constantly. It was agonizingly slow. So leadership mandated this radical shift. They ordered all internal teams to completely decouple their infrastructure. They had to break that giant Jenga tower into totally separate, distinct software services that only communicated through strict, standardized rules called APIs.
Okay, so to take it back to the physical world for a second, it's like a massive restaurant kitchen that has descended into total chaos. The chefs are screaming, orders are getting lost, the waiters are physically colliding with the cooks.
Right.
And to fix it, the manager mandates that waiters can no longer walk into the kitchen and talk to the chefs directly. They have to put a standardized written ticket on a rail. And that ticket on the rail is the API. It creates a standardized boundary so the chefs can just focus on cooking.
That is a brilliant analogy, yes.
Okay.
By decoupling their internal systems, they created these clean digital building blocks. Compute power, storage, database management, they were all separated into standardized services.
Like the tickets on the rail.
Exactly. But here is the monumental pivot. Once they built this highly efficient ticketing system just to stop their own internal bleeding, they looked at it and realized something profound.
They realized the ticketing system was actually worth way more than the food they were selling.
Precisely. They realized that if a massive entity like Amazon was struggling with these brutal computing and storage bottlenecks, well, every other growing company in the world was probably struggling with the exact same thing.
Wow.
They had accidentally built a scalable solution for the entire internet.
That is just incredible.
Yeah.
They take an internal mess, standardize it just to survive, and it accidentally becomes one of the most profitable divisions in the history of the tech industry.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it highlights a fundamental mechanism of true entrepreneurship: build for scale before you actually need it. They engineered an infrastructure so robust, so inherently flexible, that it could not only handle their own massive volume, but it could be seamlessly rented out to the rest of the world.
But, we have to pause here, because building that kind of impenetrable, highly efficient machine doesn't just happen in a vacuum. And if we're really looking at the unvarnished reality today, we have to look at the broader consequences of this relentless, uncompromising drive for scale.
We absolutely do. Building an empire of this magnitude involves profound, often controversial trade-offs.
Right.
The transition from a scrappy startup where people are just packing boxes on the floor to a global, hyper-optimized logistical machine, it has brought intense, sustained scrutiny.
Yeah, the discussions surrounding the company are incredibly polarized right now. Looking at the sources, we see widespread concerns regarding workplace conditions inside those massive, deeply automated fulfillment centers.
Yeah.
There are massive debates over their sheer market dominance and intense scrutiny regarding highly aggressive competitive practices against smaller businesses. And we want to be clear to you listening that we are not taking a stance on these controversies, but reporting impartially on the facts as they stand. The scale brought intense friction.
Exactly. The drive to be the everything store naturally collides with human limitations and market ecosystems. The transition to tightly monitored, algorithmically driven fulfillment centers that introduced entirely new sets of challenges regarding human labor tracking and corporate oversight.
So I have to ask you about this paradox. Bezos clearly prioritized scale, efficiency, and systemization above all else, often ignoring immense public backlash or unpopularity to get there.
He did.
How does that ruthless, machine-like efficiency fit into the narrative of a company that constantly preaches about learning from its mistakes? Because from the outside, it seems less like a warm educational environment and more like an unrelenting steamroller.
It is a paradox, sure, but it is a consistent one.
How so?
Well, the same long-term machine-like focus that saved the company from the dot-com crash, that supreme willingness to just ignore external critics and focus solely on the internal system, is the exact same mechanism that drives its controversial operational standards today.
Oh, I see.
It isn't a contradiction. It's a cohesive philosophy. They don't view mistakes as human foibles to be forgiven. They view them as systemic errors to be ruthlessly engineered out of existence. Once they decided that maximum logistical efficiency was the key to their survival, they applied that cold, systemic logic to everything, including human capital and market competition.
It's the ultimate double-edged sword. The highly engineered system that guarantees your two-day delivery is the exact same system that generates the intense labor scrutiny and the monopoly debates. You literally cannot untangle the two.
You really can't. And that is exactly why looking past the sanitized, PR-friendly version of the garage startup myth is so vital. You have to understand the mechanics of the machine to understand both its incredible triumphs and its profound criticisms.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today, from bleeding on a warehouse floor to the invention of modern cloud computing. Let's distill this down for you, the listener. If you're building a team, running a business, or just trying to navigate a chaotic career path, what is the ultimate takeaway from this unvarnished history?
I think the highest level takeaway here is the difference between symptomatic problem solving and systemic problem solving.
Okay, unpack that.
Well, the story of early Amazon proves that real success isn't about avoiding mistakes. When their logistics were failing, they didn't just hire more people to sit on the floor and tape boxes faster.
Right, that would be fixing a symptom.
Exactly. They completely tore down the system, they decoupled the software, they invented chaotic storage, they obsessed over their biggest, most embarrassing weakness until it became an impenetrable strength.
Yes. Don't just patch the leak, rebuild the plumbing. Your biggest current weakness, the thing that is actively failing right now, could literally define your future success, but only if you have the courage to engineer a systemic solution rather than just slapping on a temporary patch.
And ultimately, it is about the power of the float.
The breathing room.
Yes, the power of buying yourself breathing room. Bezos' story is fundamentally about resilience under extreme existential uncertainty. The ultimate goal in business, or in really any long-term project, isn't to get immediate applause from the critics. It's to build a foundation strong enough that you can simply stay in the game longer than anyone else.
Long-term dominance over short-term approval. I absolutely love that. And that brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with today, something to mull over as you go about your week, building on the mechanisms we've just uncovered.
Yeah.
If Amazon's biggest, most wildly profitable triumph, AWS, was born entirely out of an agonizing, frustrating, internal technical mess, it makes you wonder about your own life.
What incredibly chaotic, frustrating internal bottleneck are you dealing with at work right now? What is the thing that is driving you and your team absolutely crazy, the system that just keeps breaking down? Because if you stopped patching it and actually built a systemic solution to fix that specific pain point, could it become your greatest asset? Maybe the very thing driving you crazy today is your trillion-dollar idea in disguise.